Hello everyone. Welcome to our second edition of the MarketWatch View from Germany webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. We started with this series 1.5 weeks ago with the intention to give a focused but brief view on varying topics here in the German market. The series will recur from now on every Wednesday. So last time we looked at the Fridays, but with the new setup, we will now do this webinar always on Wednesdays, weekly at 2 p.m. And in our last week's edition, we looked at emergency support from the German and federal government for organizations with direct presence here in the market. Please reach out to Jens or myself. We are the host of this week's webinar. If you missed out on the information, if you would like to have this information, and we are happy to send it to you. And we have a slide deck, we have the webinar, and whatever you need. We are also happy to connect you with the lawyers and the tax advisors from last week if you have any questions in this regard. Some housekeeping to begin with. If you have any questions, please send them through the questions tool here in GoToWebinar. We will collect these questions and will ask these questions at the end of each session. We will also share the slides of today with all attendees, and we will upload the recording to our Global Ambition website. Today's topics, two topics which we find relevant because living in an age of being heavily connected and having an information overload through these connections. Firstly, information management is more important than ever. Gathering, structuring, and selecting industry and business-related information is the key, cutting through the noise and to begin prepare for the after. And secondly, the here and now might be the reason why you joined us. Our second part today will therefore review the outcome on the survey for current supplier management and first-hand insights from Germany buyers in light of COVID-19. Jens, if I may ask, please introduce our speakers today.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrick, and also welcome from my side and good afternoon to all of you. As Patrick has addressed, the two major themes for today, which are probably omnipresent for all of us in relation to business at the moment, especially in times of COVID-19 pandemic, are the two that he's mentioned. One of the themes is around the management from German companies of their supply chains and procurement structures, with special regards, of course, to the current challenges and issues. To cover that, we're very happy today that Dr. Yüzgülec from the company Inverto from Cologne joins us today. Inverto is an agency that focuses exclusively on the supply chain structures and procurement, primarily from German SMEs and multinationals. Inverto just undertook, as Patrick said, an analysis about the impact and issues on supply chains and how buyers structure their way of doing business in these challenging times. So this will hopefully offer insights, and not only insights, but first-hand insights, as they did an analysis by survey design into how German buyers set their priorities, they deal with suppliers, and where their pain points and bottlenecks are at the moment, which we will think can help to understand how we need to face up these important stakeholders for our companies. And secondly, after that, we're looking into how to manage incoming industry information, starting with information we consume every day from the state level, from our counties, the 16 that we have in Germany, down to city councils in Germany, which includes all around the regulations that are updated regularly at the moment, funding opportunities and supports that the government offers. Secondly, on the information stream, we're talking about information of German companies towards their supply chain and other stakeholders. This hopefully delivers an understanding of when, why, where, and how our customers share relevant business insights with us and what they directly mean for us. Dr. Patrick Kim, founder of the intercultural management consultancy Bridge Builders, and also former manager of Daimler, BMW, and Renault, for example, which shares experience and insights about the information management. And we will also start with this stream on information management. And if I could ask Patrick to start his presentation from now on.
Thank you very much, Jens and Patrick, for introducing this session. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to spend a few minutes with you this afternoon, sharing a few thoughts that Jens has asked me to put together. Let's move to the first slide right away. I'd like to take this as a bit of a situation in what most of you probably have seen at some point or another, which is basically one aspect of management which many people seem to have in the back of their minds but never get to apply. And this is definitely a time where we are dealing with a crisis management situation. And in particular, I'd like to go into a couple points which are relevant at this point with this specific situation of the COVID epidemic. One has to do with communication and how can we start to make sense about that so that our crisis management team can deal with not just containing the risk or ensuring business continuity, but start managing a recovery program and not dispersing ourselves too much. Next, please. That's why I called this cutting through the noise. As you know, probably many of you have seen this. There is a way of writing crisis in Chinese characters, which basically consists of the characters danger and opportunity. This is really what we need to pay attention to. A lot of us, no doubt, are busy because we're worried about family members, about friends, about our freedom of movement. And I think that we need to be careful to not let this swap over into our professional thinking because we have an opportunity as well as a certain danger in the current situation of how to deal with the information. There are 4 points I'd like to bring to your attention, which are the ones I would deal with in a position of having to make a decision. The first is to maximize the signal to noise ratio. As you know, everybody seems to have become an expert on epidemic modeling, on corona, on all kinds of theories of what's going to happen and when. And definitely there's a lot of noise around. And this is not conducive to our setting ourselves up to make sound decisions and building up a plan. And we do need to lead our teams to agree on a focus of attention for the teams in the business, because we are all going to be running after whatever information we can grab to try to make sense of what's coming up. So first point, in maximizing the signal to noise ratio, focus on relevant information. There's too much garbage out there. And I think that the basic criteria is to scan whatever there is out there in the way of information in terms of what has a primary influence on our business. In particular, I encourage people around me to go to the source. You know, we love to read commentaries and newspapers. I think that if we want real data and the facts that are the ones that decision makers need to proceed, go to the source. And I'll have a few sources together for you on the next page. Second is beware of the forecasts. This is a great time for consultants. I am a consultant, but at the same time, I am one who is very wary about making forecasts. I have stopped believing in forecasts a long time ago. And in such cases where there is no experience, you can be sure that these forecasts are all a pretty big pile of baloney. So what do we do in that case? Well, for one, we need to realize that the risk of the forecast is that they are very general at this point, and none of them really take into account our situation, your particular situation. And I would encourage you to take a different approach, which is one of scenarios and contingency, basically keeping a flexibility and making sure you understand the corridor of possibilities within which we are moving. And these are, again, can be given to you by analyzing the data, which you will get at the source. In this case, important is to be in touch, communicate with the relevant business partners in your environment. Third point, stay focused on restart readiness. It's, of course, a bit stressful to see how the numbers of our businesses are shifting out of our plan. We do need to make sure, though, that when things are announced to proceed again, and there will be time deferrals according to regions, we are basically at a push button level of readiness. A big factor here is staff morale and capabilities. So we need to make regular adjustments and keep our employees in the loop. Keep our co-workers informed, communicate also with them. They are our business partners in the primary sense. And finally, coordinate with the customers. Customers who are the main business partners for whom we are working. Be aware that all OEMs have set up contingency teams or crisis management teams. They have special groups of people, usually led out of procurement, who are available to discuss with you how to deal with the crisis and to keep informed about the plans of your customers and be able to align yourself on them. So agree with these contacts in the contingency teams about interface, who speaks with whom and with which frequency, because most of them are not going to want you to call them all the time. So I think here it's a good chance to set up a new type of relationship about agreeing on frequency that makes most sense. And then agree on triggers and reaction times to these triggers so that you are ready to start up again and activate your team and your resources. Next, please. So key information sources for Germany in particular. Here I want you to be aware that Germany, I would like to remind you that Germany is a federal state, meaning that there is federal authority for many aspects of business and daily life, and both of them are intimately related. So what I have been doing in particular, and this is something I can encourage you to do, is to really make sure you have the full chain related to your business, to your sites of operations, from the EU level down to your company sites. And I've given you some examples on the right-hand side of the sources of information that have been set up during this crisis so that you can get the official take. And yes, some rumors tend to surface before the official takes, but until it becomes official, they are just rumors. So the best is to, if you hear the rumors, make sure you check it, but not over commentaries or pundits, but over the ones who are actually making the decisions on our freedom to operate. So go to the source, avoid doubtful media, be critical about even the serious media. Some of the analyses are very good. I have been following things on Handelsblatt, and they tend to be quite good, but they might not be directly relevant for you because they generalize at a higher level for EU and all of Germany, but maybe not the land or the city in which you are working, where specific rules might be still valid. So use the German sites. DeepL is a translation software, so if you're having trouble with the German language, you can cut and paste. I found DeepL to be fairly accurate, so that's also a resource for the ones who are in need of some assistance with language. Next slide. To wrap up, the OEMs have already given some clear signals, some signals that are mandated and some that come out of their supplier management. They are adapting the risk management because obviously current risk management systems have not proven sufficient to deal to the full extent with this kind of risk, although it is usually known in corporations and there are certain contingency plans. There are clear indications that one lesson learned is that the OEMs will shorten their supply chains and they will factor in short-term to mid-term decreases in demand, which are obviously quite difficult to figure out at this point. But consumer demand is definitely going to be affected by the social repercussions of the crisis. This is not just a B2B problem. Consumer demand is going to go through some pretty major tectonics in the next few weeks and months. I'm not making predictions on what they are, but just be aware of this. And one result that is usually the case in times like these at OEMs is that they will reduce non-essentials and also where it hurts least in the short to medium term. So they will be reducing their R&D spendings. I have several of my clients who have already called me to indicate this, and some of them are shifting their spendings to the essentials needed for starting up again, and R&D will be reduced at some of them 20 to 30%. Some of them might even go farther. So this is definitely the time to reinforce contact with them. They will be reinforcing collaboration with their extended enterprise. So it's a good chance to have your hand held out to them to say, I'm here, I'm going to be working more closely to you. They're looking for that, and definitely relying on their supply chain partners. So yeah, the points below, I'll just let you read them. On the left side, some recommendations for you in terms of how to be ready to start up again within the next few weeks. Definitely use the time, not just to deal with short-term things, but use the time also to do some deep thinking. This is something that we tend to not do enough. And make your checklist. I don't know if you have this, but a specific checklist for this year, not a generic one. And use the chance to figure out what this has revealed about your weaknesses and make some adaptations in your organizations. So that's all I wanted to say today. There's one more page I have added, which I will not talk about, but which is about some risk factors to observe. It's kind of a checklist for you to figure out where to look and where to orient your thoughts. Otherwise, thank you for your attention, and I am available for further questions after the session. Back to you, Jens.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Thanks, Mel. So very interesting insights into the information management from and for German companies. There's one question that has come in, and Maurice, I'm seeing that your team needs to go back to Frankfurt to the construction site, and you're asking for the paperwork that will be needed to allow your team to get back. This is, I think, off the topic that Patrick has discussed. We're very happy to deal with that after the session, I'd say, to get a solution for you. So we will get in touch with you right after the session and talk about the travel regulations through for the team and how to get back to Frankfurt best. Patrick, there's no further question at this stage. Maybe from my side, one quick question. You talked about the procurement crisis teams in the companies. Do you have any suggestions how to best reach them? Maybe also already for Inverto, who deal with the procurement teams all day, every day. But maybe Patrick, do you have a suggestion on how to best get in touch with them?
Well, that is going to depend on the customers. So I would recommend to be in touch with your procurement partner at the OEM or tier one, and just ask them, who is it? This is what I said earlier. Who is it, and with what frequency? And they're probably going to say, please don't call in. We have so much to do. But this basic coordination with them on who to call, how often and when is essential for the coordination. So that is definitely a question it's legitimate to insist that they give you a clear answer on, and not have them refer you just to their supply website.
Okay, thanks. Is there any further questions for Pat? Is there anything to add, Patrick? No, obviously not. If there's anything that comes to your mind or questions arising later, just reach out to ourselves and we will put you in touch with Patrick then to deal with that. And next, I would just jump over to the second presentation from Dr. Yüzgülec from Inverto, talking about the supply chain issues and the results of the survey that they've run over the last while.
Great, thank you, Jens. So, as Jens was just mentioning, my name is Gökhan Yüzgülec. I'm working for Inverto. Maybe you can go to the next page where I have, first of all, the content for today, as well as some more slides about us and the survey we did. So the idea today is to present you very, very briefly who we are and what we do, that you have an understanding of the background, why we did the survey and how we did it. And then I would like to briefly present how we designed our COVID-19 survey and then what the results are. We were looking at different topics, different areas across many industries, and I think there are some interesting results for you. And at the very end, I would like to share with you all the recommendations we share with our clients who are actually procurement managers, but which then may be also relevant for you guys in case you're planning to get in touch with procurement in general for German companies. So next slide, please. So who we are is actually, we are procurement and supply chain consultants. The company Inverto was founded in 2000, so 20 years ago, by actually 3 founders who are still in the company today in Cologne. We are actually a full service provider, everything around procurement and supply chain management in terms of consultancy. We are very much actually focusing on implementation, so we are not very much developing strategies and concepts, but we are rather focusing on supporting our clients during their implementation. This is actually what makes us different, I think. We have around 180 procurement experts. Our base headquarters is in Cologne, but meanwhile we have different offices in Europe, so Sweden, Denmark, Austria, Germany. There are 2 offices, as well as UK, and 1 office is in China. Our clients are primarily SMEs. There are a couple of OEMs, but it's rather SMEs across all industries, with headquarters primarily in Germany, but a global footprint. And 3.5 years ago, we were actually bought by the Boston Consulting Group, you may know. So we are currently a 100% daughter company. Next slide, please. So I was talking about that already. We are operating across all industries. And here you see actually a snapshot of some of our clients. I think this there is no further explanation needed. You may know many of them. Next slide, please. So what we did recently, actually mid of March, was that we decided, based on the current situation, COVID-19, to better understand what the impact is on our clients' procurement organizations, on their companies, as well as where they are in terms of taking measures and what they expect what will happen next. So one idea is, of course, to understand better the market, but also to let us understand how we can support our clients. And the way how we did the survey is explained on the next slide. So we are focusing very much on companies who have their headquarters in Germany, Austria, or Switzerland, so the DACH region, which makes around 80% of the overall participants. The remaining 20% have their headquarters actually around the globe, some in the US, some in the UK, some in China, but the focus was rather on German companies. And overall, we had 102 participants who joined this survey. And we have on the next slide also shown what industries we were addressing with this survey. So you can see that there are, I think, 23 industries across these 102 participants. The major ones are actually machine and plant engineering, retail, automotive, and healthcare. So this is actually our focus, but as you can see, we have actually nearly addressed all of the industries. Next slide, please. So what did we ask for? Actually, we broke down our survey into 4 sections. One is that we asked for the impact. So how did COVID-19 impact your organization? Second was, what measures did you take? 3 is, what challenges do you see by implementing all these measures you're planning to do? And 4 is then the final outlook, what the companies and the participants expect to happen, and what changes actually in the long-term view they expect to see in their supply chains. Next slide, please. So here we have the impact on the revenue responded by all the participants. As you can see here, there is a huge number of people who expect, of course, a revenue decrease. this is about 69% of the participants who expect a revenue decrease. Only 9% expect the revenue increase, and there is a small number of 22% of participants who do not really see a clear impact of COVID-19 on their revenue. By looking at the revenue decrease, you can see that 38% expect a decrease by 10 to 20%, whereas 31% expect even higher decreases in their revenue. Specifically, it's larger than 20%. On the next slide, we have broken down this revenue expectations into the major industries. And here we have got automotive, retail, pharma, and machine and plant engineering. And you can see that actually automotive is expecting 100%. So all participants are expecting a revenue decrease, whereas retail is rather 1/3 thinking that there might be even an increase in revenue, and 67% expect rather a decrease. Pharma and healthcare is actually 40-40-20. So there doesn't seem to be a clear picture of what's going to happening with their revenue. And machine and plant engineering, you can see that it's half and half nearly, that half of the participants expect an increase, whereas the other half expect a decrease on revenue. So it's quite interesting to see that the majority does expect a decrease, but looking deeper into the industries, the picture actually changes. And especially retail, I think we can explain that due to the open shops and also the online retail shops, there is still ways to get some revenue and to increase the revenue. So it has actually some positive impact as well. Actually, we were recently talking to a client of Inverto who have really high cost goods, so luxury goods for primarily ladies. They are selling online handbags for ladies from Louis Vuitton and all the very expensive, super expensive brands. And they were telling us that their revenue has indeed increased, and they have rather an issue with liquidity, whereas of course many companies are rather lack or short of cash and have some liquidity issues. So it's both ways, as we can see, but the majority is rather expecting a decrease. Next slide, please. Besides all the revenue issues, we asked also for bottlenecks within their supply chains. First question was on the top, if the companies have already faced bottlenecks in their supply chains due to COVID-19, and secondly, if they are expecting to have bottlenecks. And as you can see on the right-hand side, they either do see bottlenecks or face bottlenecks already today, so by end of March, or they expect further bottlenecks in their supply chains. And what we can see here additionally is one thing that the bottlenecks they expect to be increased. So we will have more bottlenecks in the future than they have currently today already. And secondly, actually, this is even more interesting, is that the severity of the bottlenecks will increase as well. So if you look on the top, on the right-hand side, you can see that there is 38% out of these 86%, which have only a low severity, whereas on the bottom, you can see that this number will increase, and the medium and severe bottlenecks will actually increase up to around 70-80% out of these 19. 70 actually, yeah. So interesting thing, which then also led us to ask what these companies now do to face all these bottlenecks and challenges. So next slide, please. We divided our measures we asked for into 3 areas. One was what do we do in terms of cash improvement or cash management. Secondly was, do we do anything about EBITDA improvement? And thirdly was about the stabilization of the supply chain. So we asked many questions and asked for many responses in these three areas. This is a high-level summary actually, where you can see what measures those companies have already taken or what they plan to do. So looking into deep detail within the cash improvement area, you can see that, for example, scenario-based planning is something which is very important for the companies, but hasn't been realized yet. So this is rather an internal thing. Secondly, we see that they are very much looking at their cash management and to reduce and avoid actually non-critical spend, which is very relevant for 80% of the participants, but has been only implemented by 50%. Thirdly, we have within the cash improvement all these working capital topics, which is on the agenda for over even 80%, but have not taken by only 20%. In the area of EBITDA, the companies are actually redefining internally their budgets and savings targets. So of course, due to all the revenue decreases, they are reacting internally by also decreasing targets as well as budgets, but also are looking very much on the renegotiation of emerging cost potentials. So going back to their suppliers and asking for cost improvements and cost downs externally. Both is relevant by 70%, but has been only implemented by 30% of the companies by end of March. Additionally, they are very much focusing on the OPEX spend as well as on the CAPEX spend. And there are many activities we know from our clients, but also this survey shows us that these are very strong areas of looking at that. And this is actually in line what Patrick was just presenting. All these, we call them war rooms, has been established, and there are small teams looking every day at all the spend and approving or rejecting actually in order to really have only critical spend. And last but not least, we have the stable supply chain activities. So we asked if all our clients or of the participants actually tend to support their suppliers either financially or non-financially. And surprisingly, there's actually only a small number who's interested in doing so, or what is relevant for them to do so. Only 29%, and only 10% have started with doing so. Actually, I cannot understand it because I think they need to act more closely, but it doesn't seem to be yet an issue or yet relevant that much to increase the number of collaborations. And then additionally, we have got risk mitigation strategies as well as alternative supply chain scenarios, which is a very interesting thing. Super relevant, super interesting. So many participants plan to change actually, or at least to look for alternative supply chain scenarios or supply scenarios, which can be changing the supplier, but also changing geography within one supplier. Last but not least, central war rooms, similar to the EBITDA improvement. There are small teams who are really monitoring on a daily basis what the supply status is and if all the goods are on their way to their production, to make sure that they can still deliver as planned. Next slide, please. So I was talking about these three areas, liquidity, actually business resilience, which is the EBITDA improvement, as well as supply chain. We could see that many participants have already been active in these three areas. So 79% have already started to be active in the liquidity area. 88% do some business resilience activities. And then there are 79 which have taken measures in the supply chain resilience area. And much interesting is actually that most of the participants not only look on one area, but on all three areas, and don't do it isolated, but always see this triple, and 65% are active in all three areas. Next slide, please. So the next chapter was about challenges. We asked for the difficulties by implementing all these measures we asked for. And one major thing is, of course, that predicting the future scenarios due to lack of reliable information is super actually critical for them, because they don't know what's going to happen. So taking measures only, of course, makes sense if you know what could happen. And there is no forecast, nothing available. No one knows what lockdown situation we will have in a few weeks. So this is one of the major challenges. Secondly, lack of transparency and knowledge in potential supply bottlenecks. So this is one thing I think we were facing in the past anyways, and this has now increased, that the companies don't have any transparency about what part is where available on what time and by when, and is feeding what customer order actually. Travel restrictions, of course, rather an internal thing, then the prioritization of demand reduction and cuts. So internally, they can't decide what costs to decrease first, since they have multiple budget owners and everyone is fighting for his own budget. It's quite hard to say this budget will cut first or secondly. There are a few more challenges you can read yourself, I think. The last one is lack of required market intelligence. So some procurement managers don't even know the market that well. It's a small number, but it's still relevant, I think. So I think for most of you, it's still relevant to present yourself, because people may not even know you or know the market, especially in Ireland. So also a relevant topic. Next slide, please. Last but not least, we asked for the outlook. So what do we expect, what's going to happen, or how all this COVID-19 situation and crisis will change your procurement organization as well as supply chain. And I think there are a couple of interesting and relevant things for you. Besides some crisis response procedures, which will change in the future, which is about 46%, I think the major or most important or most relevant answer is that they expect that they will have modified supply chain structures in the future. So the more we talk to our clients, the more they tell us that all this global sourcing and this trend to also outsource everything and to go to China and Asia and to source from there will rather decrease. They will go back to the initial situation, or the situation we had a couple of years ago, that there will be more local sourcing within Europe or within Germany, which might be interesting for most of you, I guess. And I think all this thinking of cost cutting and so on, and low prices will change. There will be always a trend to have cost efficiency, but I think a stable supply chain and availability of parts and products will still be the king. Saying that, also increased supply chain transparency through technology will be a major topic for most of the clients, and we see that already today, that many companies and clients are asking, how can we increase transparency? There is so much technology available. What's the best technology for my company? I think this trend was there already anyways, but will now be accelerated by all this current situation. Strong partnerships with suppliers. This seems to be a relevant topic. So I think in the past, it was more about what can I get from my supplier, and it will rather turn into what can we achieve together. Also a good topic, I think, for most of you might be relevant. And the last one I would like to mention here is the supply business continuity planning. So many companies we're talking to don't have currently a systematic and professional supply business continuity planning. So that is not a real supply chain risk management in place. And this is something they are planning to establish to be prepared for the next crisis, because they know there will be a next crisis for sure. Next slide, please. One further slide, please. Yes, thank you. So this is actually the slide we share with our clients. So this might not be relevant for some of you. We tell them to first stabilize the current situation to secure the supply within the supply chains, but to then also use this current situation as a chance to decrease costs with their suppliers by looking for different suppliers, but also to renegotiate their prices as well as conditions, but also to decrease internal costs, because I think this is such an exceptional situation currently that the managers should now look at what can we do, what have we maybe spent within the last years, which is not really necessary. And now there is a point of time, which is quite a good point of time to review all this spend actually also internally. It's a reset of budget, you could say. As I was already mentioning, we really recommend to do it holistically, so not only focusing on one area, but on all three areas. And last but not least, it's always the supply chain which will win in the future. I'm very convinced. Isolated companies will never be successful. There are so many dependencies in all directions, and we can see that right now. So partnerships in general will definitely increase, and this is again something for you, which might be relevant to approach companies by being open, by finding joint solutions. First, for example, we have some companies who are looking for suppliers who are just open for new technologies or for new methodologies in terms of payment terms. For example, we had recently a project in the chemicals industry that it was not only about negotiating payment terms and to extend the payment terms, but to see if there are different innovative solutions, such as reverse factoring or supply chain financing, where the client forwards the invoice from its supplier to a bank, and then where the bank actually pays the invoices of the client for the suppliers or on behalf of the client, and then the client pays the bank much later. And this principle is called reverse factoring. Some of you may know that. There are different providers for such a platform which provide this service actually. And this, for example, is becoming more and more a trend. We just introduced it as a client, and there are suppliers who are not open to have such solutions, whereas others are quite open to do so. And I really highly recommend to just be open for that kind of collaborations. That's just one example. Thank you from my side, and I'm handing over back to Jens.
And I'll straight away give it to Patrick, who's wrapping up, I think.
Thank you, Gökhan. So one question which came up in my mind when listening to you, you said that there is the expectation that there are more and more bottlenecks to come and more severe bottlenecks in the future. While also you were talking about working capital measurements. Do you currently see increased working capital or increased stocks? So how are like companies tackling the situation of like facing the bottlenecks, but also obviously increasing liquidity and then obviously working on working capital measurements?
Yeah, actually, we see the trend it's going into another way. The major problem of the current situation is that the companies are running out of cash, and we can see that in the media everywhere. Adidas is an example which is up to date, and in order to actually face the situation, they are rather decreasing their minimum stock level and using up their current stock level or stock in general, rather than increasing it. So the trend is rather the other way around for at least the old companies who have some cash issues. So inventory is rather decreasing.
Thank you very much. Then I have a question from Norma regarding new procurement strategies. Does local mean within the EU, Western world, or the national borders?
Actually, both. So I meant actually Europe. It can be, of course, within the same country, but with local, it is not. It is rather Europe.
I think that's also aligned with what Angela Merkel recently said, that she is expecting more Europeans like produced goods instead of like looking always to Asia.
Correct.
So I would second this.
Yeah.
Gökhan, Patrick, thanks very much for your insights and for taking the time to share this with you, with us. It was, from my side, very interesting. I think I've learned something new today, and we're happy to make introductions with our attendees who might have questions. And thank you to everyone attending, and hope to see you soon again.